What is consciousness? Well, today we're going to spend a few minutes just thinking about what consciousness really is and how we might understand it better in the context of conscious leadership. So, consciousness is not a word that is used very frequently in relation to leadership, despite the many definitions we have of leadership these days. And consciousness is something that is really very much part of who we are, how we are, but we don't necessarily think about it as much as we might in everyday terms. So I'd like to just say a little bit more about that and maybe define it a little bit more, translate it in some ways for our everyday understanding. We can obviously speak about consciousness as being aware of, having an understanding of, paying attention to. So in the sort of everyday terms, it's what is in our field of awareness and understanding. Consciousness also has a more spiritual definition, which has to do with the level at which we might be thinking about and connecting with the world. So our philosophy, our sense of energy and how energy moves, the degree to which we are aware of things like intuition and understanding the way in which we might develop that capacity, that capability, and how we then might apply that to leadership. So, having defined that in broad terms, let's see if we can go a little bit further with this definition. Firstly, we need to come back to some of those principles that Abraham Maslow spoke about, where we as humans tend to need to focus first and foremost as we start our development and our evolution on things like safety and security. And that's understandable. We need to have a roof over our heads. We need to make sure that we have a way of surviving in this world. And so our consciousness, our attention, if you will, goes to those sorts of things. How can I actually develop myself in a secure way and be sure that I can then start to expand to perhaps wider interests, wider focus? So security and survival, yes, those are the basic levels. But it is also goes way beyond that. As our place secures, as we become more established in our understanding, we start to expand our consciousness into relationships, into our place in the world alongside other people. And so our awareness, our attention, if you will, expands to bring in other people, other contexts, other relationships. So we start to take a much broader lens. And that broader lens gives us a sense of connection, if you will, to many different lines of understanding, both physical in terms of the various kingdoms that we might understand that we're connected to. So we may become aware of animals, we may become more aware of nature, we may become more aware of how we move within those wider aspects of life. And so our network expands, but also our human network, the relationships and so on. And we start to develop a greater sense of compassion, kindness perhaps. So we noticed also that not only are we connecting more widely, but we're also starting to feel differently. We've moved beyond the individual and into something that feels a lot more connected to how others are faring and what the impact of maybe our actions and other actions are on people. So as we expand on the physical, practical level and in the awareness level, we also expand on the emotional level. And we start to see ourselves and others within and across a much bigger system, a much bigger network. And not only do we understand and recognize that there are animals and plants and mineral kingdom, but as our consciousness expands, we start to see that as interconnected and in relationship with each other. And so we see those as levels of consciousness, and that the human kingdom, if you will, is part of that connection. And actually that connection goes beyond the human kingdom. We might call it cosmic. Some would use the word spiritual. Others would speak about soul and spirit itself rather than spirituality. So as we expand our consciousness beyond our humanness, we start to connect with that sense of something deeper within us and how that relates across these various kingdoms and levels that we're now much more aware of, but also expanding that out to something more subtle, more almost intangible, we might say, and yet it has some very tangible impact on who we are and how we function. So, why does this matter? What is consciousness all about? Well, as we become more aware of that interconnectedness, we see ourselves as able to create a better system, create a better world. We start to address our motivation on a different level. We start to think about things that we can actually do that improve the quality of life, not just for ourselves at the survival and security level, but at the collective level, at the whole level, at the level where we see that as we act, we also have an effect on others. And that effect on others is something we can choose to do something about. And so our consciousness expands to take in many other facets of life with a big L, so all the different elements of life. So this is consciousness, but what's that got to do with leadership? Well, conscious leadership is then how we apply our wider, broader, deeper awareness, and indeed our intuition and sense of new information that comes through as we expand our consciousness. We then apply that to how we lead in the world, whether that's in business, in organizations, in education, in any of the different entities that we might find ourselves, even within the family, as contacting our leadership. Conscious leadership is not just about being aware of leadership itself, but is about stepping much more into a leadership impact that is in service of a better world for all. So this is a big and complex subject. We've touched on just the kind of high level of it at this point, but really wanted to try and demystify a little bit, even though at the expanded levels of consciousness, of course, there is a lot of mystery. There is a lot of sensing and intuition and expansion on a more subtle level that we connect into, often supported through things like meditation and mindfulness and reflection. We speak more about this in our book that is dedicated to conscious business, which is called Heartful Business, Leading with the World in Mind. And if you want to understand more about not only consciousness, but this new definition of leadership, we certainly invite you to have a look at that. And really, for now, I just want to close this short podcast with an invitation to be part of something bigger, to expand your own sense of awareness so that you ask more questions. And that in doing so, you start to engage in something maybe deeper within yourself and within the groups that you're part of. And if we can join all of that up together, we as conscious leaders will create a better world for all. Thank you for listening. And you'll find some information at the end of this that might be useful to you.